Alright, so welcome to the Retzone podcast, episode 2, Remasters of the Universe.
Don'ts! Half-wits! Bunglers!
So today we're going to be talking about remasters, remakes, collections, stuff like that. So obviously, you know, like Ninja Gaiden Trilogy and like Super Mario Brothers, there's the new Super Mario All-Stars, all sorts of fun stuff like that. I'm, of course, Chris. I'm also joined with Ramon and the other Chris. So, Ramon?
Yep, I'm here again for episode 2.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Yep, we are doing good.
That was the other Chris. I'm the HD remaster.
Remaster the remaster.
Yeah, the remaster.
Yeah, we have to sort of differentiate ourselves somehow.
Well,
I'm known as Chris with a K, so we can go with that. So
Good.
that's what my friends call me because all my other friends that are Chris are all C's, right? So.
yeah, so
Yep.
okay, Chris with a K, and I'll be calling you.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go. We're coming from the sunny beaches of Canada. Alright, so might as well get started here. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I guess we can start off with what makes a remake or a remaster. What makes it good?
Yeah, let's set some criteria first.
Let's actually
what makes it good?
let's actually figure out what makes a remake, what makes a remaster, because it's kind of like a distinction between the two.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll kind of set some boundaries here before we kind of really jump into it.
I'm a little fuzzy between remakes and remasters.
Yeah. So for me, like a remake is something where it's like they've completely redone the game. Like if you look at Resident Evil 2, where it's the game, like it's the same game, the same setting, same weapons, stuff like that, but it's like a whole new engine, like everything is rebuilt from scratch. Like they didn't just take the game, port it, and slap new graphics on it. Like they remade the whole game.
Okay, so a remake is like a recode up from scratch.
To me that's a remake, is where they're completely remaking the game, or like they're changing the fundamentals of the game. That's a remake to me.
So a game I'm familiar with is the new Final Fantasy VII.
That's a true remake.
That'd be a
true
remake. Yeah,
Okay.
that would
That's
be
a true remake.
For me, something like a remaster is more just like they're taking the old game, they're upgrading the graphics, they're putting maybe some polish, like fixing some bugs, stuff like that. But it's still like the same core mechanics and everything are still like exactly the same as they were. There's not really, you could take the two games, put them side by side, and it'd still play the same.
Yep.
It just looks nice.
Okay, so to clarify, a remaster is, and we were talking about this earlier, is like Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo, where they take a whole bunch of 8-bit games and then slather on a whole bunch of 16-bit attributes. And...
Yeah, I think that one's kind of a mixed bag, because that one is kind of like, you figure they had to recode the whole thing. So I don't think they really just took the NES games and the FDS games, and then they were like, well, we're just going to put it on the Super Nintendo, right? Like
It's kind of seemed like it, but...
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they had the source code or something like that, and they could do it. But I haven't. It's hard for me to say whether they play exactly the same, because I know there's like certain mechanics in like Super Mario Brothers one, like with the inertia and stuff like that. Like, is it the same in All Stars, or is it?
I think it's a bit of a gray area, because with the Xbox Series X, I threw in the original OG Xbox Splinter Cell into it, and it got upgraded to HD. So does that mean that they just slathered
some of that
res
stuff,
textures
some
on
of
it?
that stuff is just like HD texture packs and stuff like that, right?
I
They
doubt
just
they
slap over.
I doubt they recoded the whole game.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's like probably a port or something. Maybe they had to change a few things just to make it work.
Yeah.
At the bare minimum.
Yeah, well, anyway, so kind of reiterating, I guess. For me, a remake is where they completely remake the game, something like Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's a totally remake of the game. A remaster is something like Twilight Princess HD, where it's just, it's the same game, they just put new graphics on top of it and just made it look
basically
nice.
that.
Right.
And we were saying collections. I mean, collections are, I think, pretty obvious. It's just where they take a bunch of the games and they
Right.
kind of put them all together. Like,
a bunch of remasters. Usually it's remasters. So like,
yeah, well, usually they'll do a remaster of it just because it's like people are going to expect better graphics and stuff like that once they start going to new consoles. They're going to want it to look better.
Yeah,
So-
especially during the Xbox 360 era and PS3 era was like everything must be HD.
Yeah.
It was a lot there, a lot.
Well, I think for some of the collections, right, they don't really do that. Like, I mean, you look at like Castlevania Collection or Contra Collection or any of that stuff. They just took the game. I'm pretty sure they just put like emulators on top of it and just rolled it over.
There seemed to be a switch in trend because for a while there everybody wanted HD remakes of everything. But
Yeah,
but
well,
now people seem to be satisfied with just the original games just stuck in a collection because they want to see the 8-bit goodness. Or...
Yeah, well, I mean, it allows
Yeah.
them to buy all those games. They're like, well, I can't play that game because I don't have a Nintendo. Well, I could buy a Castlevania collection, and well, there, I paid $10 and I have all 3 games. Or
Like-
well, they had more than just the 3 on there.
Like, I have Rare Replay, and I know it has a whole bunch of old Rare games on it, but I haven't actually tried it yet, so I don't know if the games are in their original state.
They are,
or...
yeah, they are. Like, there's what's the game?
There's Banjo-Kazooie, and then you got like...
Oh, they had Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie.
Yeah, but those are like up-res to widescreen.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then,
Yeah, some of the stuff they did that where they just took it and they with Super Mario All-Stars, I think they just was Mario 64, I think they moved it to widescreen or something.
well, when with Super Mario 3D All-Stars, I haven't opened my copy yet, but it appears to be the same 4:3 aspect ratio. They changed a few things in the ROM, and that's for sure. Like, I don't know, I think it was like something with the Bowser boss fight. They changed a little bit of a line there, but other than that, it's almost 4:3.
Right there.
That is something we have to talk about.
I forgot they did that.
They did.
What did they do?
They changed a line.
Because
In
it was like, it says like Bye Bye Bowser or something like that.
In the original? or
I'm trying to remember what-
I think it was like
It's been so long since
I think it was supposed to say "So long, dear Bowser," but with the compression of the game, it's like it sounds like something else, and I'm sure any viewers will know what exactly it is.
Yeah, I just thought about that before. I remember there was that whole
You'll probably have to
controversy-
find a clip for that and
Yeah.
put it on
Try-
screen.
There was, there was
so it's more ruder than it was intended, kind of thing, or
yeah, there is. They changed the line of it, and it was like "You're gay, Bowser" or something like that. Is that people thought? They're like
Something
what?
like that.
like-
I'm sure viewers know exactly what that is, and they
Yeah.
know they changed the darn thing. Okay,
Yeah, so go ahead.
You're gonna have to actually look it up.
Well, it wasn't an ending change. It's just like Bowser. Just search for like
just Super
Bowser.
Mario 64, like the
Super
boss
Mario.
battle.
Yeah.
Okay, somebody got curious enough to actually look it up.
just doing a quick Google here to see if I can find what was
Well,
changed.
you're googling sucks, dude. Check for Super Mario 64 3D All Stars changes.
That's a lot of typing, man.
Well, yeah, but you're like looking see All Star differences. Yeah.
And I'm really sad to report that after Nintendo stopped selling the game like a few days ago, prices have gone up for the physical version already.
I'd buy that for $1.
Really? I haven't really been paying attention to that. I figure that's going to be one of those things.
Yeah, I saw like a listing for the physical version of the game for like $300 or something.
I don't think
Yeah.
I'm finding anything.
Ah,
relevant.
whatever. We'll find it later. Just add it into post. That's fine.
Yeah, we'll just add it in post, and
Yeah.
you know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
though,
I'm sure
for
people know what we're talking about. I kind of forgot about it.
Is it kind of like the Luigi Death Star, where they didn't really intend it to be a thing, but it ended
Well,
up
it's just
being
like the
a
way the
thing?
compression worked on the audio. It sounds like it could be taken a different way. It's basically what it was.
It's the
okay.
compression,
Like-
because remember the Nintendo 64 doesn't have a sound chip
Yeah.
per
Right.
se.
So the way it sounded is people were like, "Wait, did he just say that?" And then they changed it to like "Bye Bye Bowser" instead.
Exactly,
'Cause people are like-
exactly like that.
It's something like that. Anyway, so
All right, I guess we should actually get to our main.
yeah, I guess the meat and potatoes. So I mean, what makes a remaster good? What
Uh-huh.
makes it bad? What makes it ugly? So
Yeah.
I mean, for me, good things like I like when there's simple things they can do, like where they put like little marquees and stuff like that, where they're not expanding it to widescreen. Because sometimes if they expand it to widescreen, you just get like stretched pixels, and it just
Oh,
looks
yeah.
good. It just looks kind of silly. I'm like, it's not.
Yeah,
It's a hard thing to harp on them for doing it. It's like, well, people are expecting that, but now a lot of them they just put the marquees on the side, like Castlevanias have like kind of like the box art, and it'll kind of
Yeah, like I'm a stickler for aspect ratio. I have to have the original intended aspect ratio, or it bothers.
Yeah.
Like when circles are no longer circles, and
yeah, they
Yeah.
start
stretched
getting
out
these.
oval.
Yeah,
it turns into a freaking oval of all
Yeah.
things.
yeah.
And
So-
it's like I think the only one that really does like with aspect ratios is like when a game goes to like XBLA with like what happened with GoldenEye.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
It's like that's how you do a
that-
remaster.
That was a remake.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
sort of. It straddles the line, but it's literally how you do it. That's how you would do it if you want to do it widescreen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do have a video on the channel of me playing that if you want to see
Yeah,
it.
check it out for
I
sure.
still can't believe that was cancelled.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's a
bad.
whole thing with that one because I was actually like, why did that get? Because I know there's a whole thing with like
Licensing.
the licensing with Bond and stuff like that. They want it to be, well, it's got to be the new Bond. We don't want to have the old Bonds in there. Blah. It just became this huge mess where it's like, there's no way it can get. It's never going to come out. And
I have a feeling that Rare made it without permission and then tried to get permission for it.
well, I mean, at the time GoldenEye came out, they had license from, I think it's Eon or something, as the owners of
Yeah.
the Bond license.
Eon Productions.
Because it was like, well, they're very, very, very sticky about their license. Like, they're very protective.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
yes.
why a lot of it, because they had the GoldenEye remaster. They had 007 GoldenEye Reloaded.
Yep.
Which,
yeah, that was a thing.
It was kind of the same game. They took basically the GoldenEye movie and they put Daniel Craig in it, but it's a whole new engine and everything like that. So it's probably, I guess, as close as you'd really get to a remake of GoldenEye.
But that GoldenEye XBLA is like pure nostalgia.
Oh yeah, that's
is
like exactly
good.
what that's a true like remaster, like what the original one
It's a
was.
shame all that effort just went to waste.
Yeah.
It's like it could have gotten into like the Rare replay if the licensing wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
It would have gone into
Yeah,
that
I could have
collection.
gotten to that. But
It's too bad they could have sort of made it and removed the whole 007 thing from it, you know?
And remember,
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, you could make a same game that's like the same engine, everything like that, and just be like, well, it's not Bond, it's whatever, something else. Right?
and remember that Nintendo really doesn't hold like like the license. It's not with Nintendo. It's like the ones who actually own the license here.
Yeah,
it's not
well,
Nintendo.
Yeah, it's because of the Bond. It's the Bond license that really was causing the whole fuss with the whole thing. But yeah, so I mean, one thing that makes it good is, well, I don't even want to say it's good. It's just when they do like marquees and stuff like that. It's kind of like a basic thing. It should be done to all of them. Like if you're not going to increase the aspect ratio, like keep it the original aspect ratios, everything like that. Just put like marquees or stuff like that, and then that's good for me. I do like when they add things like they'll have like sound galleries, art galleries. They'll have like boss rush modes and stuff like that. Like the Mega Man, the Legacy Collection. They both had that where they had like little challenges where they had new stages that they kind of threw in there. They'd be like, oh, like one screen, you kill all the enemies, and you go to the next screen. It was like a time thing, and that was fun. Like I like little stuff like that. It kind of like takes the original game and it just does like a little tweak. They're like, here's a little bit more.
There were a bunch of Metal Slug compilations that were the same thing, where
Yeah.
they'd have the original games as intended in the arcade, and then they'd have like art galleries, they'd have, you know, the soundtrack you could play, and then they had these little, you know, side missions kind of based on the game, you know, new old content kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking like a good one will take the original game. It'll keep the game the same, and it'll just kind of add those like just little sprinkling the little things in there, just kind of like, well, it's still the original game. You're getting all these games for a good price, and yeah, here's some little fun things to play around with.
Now I have a question for our resident expert here,
Yeah.
Dr. Scanlines.
What about the scan lines? I'm listening.
I know you prefer that they add scan lines to everything, but do you think it actually adds anything to the compilations to do that? To make it feel like you're playing it on an old CRT or...
The thing is, like, I'm spoiled with how like RetroArch does the scan lines. It's like it's not enough to just have the lines itself. It's like you kind of need that glow going on. It's like you kind of having just the lines. It's sometimes a game can be like okay with just the lines, but when you don't have the glow, it's like it's kind of not the same. It's like you're missing something.
Yeah, but I
It's
mean,
like-
what if you're playing that on a CRT? Then you have scan lines and scan lines.
That is like double.
Yo,
double
dog, we
scan
heard you
lines.
like
Scan
scan lines
lines.
and your scan lines.
Yeah, so
It's
you
like
put
that's
scan
a-
lines
that's
in
a
your
thing.
Scan lines.
Well, I personally, I can live or live without scan lines, but the one thing I don't like is when they start putting like the bendy corners in like a CRT
Yeah, I
has.
like the CRTs.
It
And
depends
they
on
kind
who
of
you
blur
ask.
the edges a little bit.
Yeah.
That I don't like. I don't
Yeah.
like that.
I mean, I like scan lines at the odd time. It kind of there's a little bit of nostalgia with it, but it's sometimes just like I could do without it.
And
I
then
mean,
sometimes they even add the ghosting and a little bit of interference, and it's like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah,
you're
I don't
going-
need
you're
to be
going too
that-
far.
you don't need to
You're going
be
too
that.
far.
It's
That
like I
was-
like the scan lines, but I want it to look like it's coming from an RGB monitor instead of just a regular consumer set.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the
Yeah.
thing. That's
yeah.
like I mean, sometimes the bendy thing, it's like, depending on the game, I can take that, especially with an arcade game, because it adds like a little bit of immersion there.
Yeah.
But not every game has to have that, in my opinion.
Yeah, where you get the edges kind of bending down, and you're like, wait a minute.
It's like, if I was gonna play like a Sonic game and has that bendy corner, it's like, I can take it or leave. It's like, nah. I just want like Scanlines with the glow, and I'm good.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I can take that any day.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, so good things, I think, is things like I said, keeping it pixel perfect and, adding
Exactly.
marquees, like just a little splash of things. Like, you don't need to do much. Put, like, boss rush mode or, like, time attack or something. Like, art galleries, little things like that. It's kind of like, okay, you're not just being lazy and just taking the games and just being like, whatever, here it is. Like, for me, like, a lazy ones is more where it's, they just didn't do anything with it. They just take the game and they're like, whatever, here's a compilation of games. Like, whatever. They don't really add anything to it.
I'm looking at you at games.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then again, that's like another topic in itself with clone consoles.
That's a whole podcast in itself. Just...
It's like, we can rip that thing apart all day if we want to.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of like the bad. I mean, it's not even necessarily bad. It's kind of like lazy. Like, ones that are more bad, like, I wouldn't even say it's ugly yet, but things like Ninja Gaiden Trilogy where they changed some stuff around and, like, the sound was, like, off, and, like, there's just weird little things they did when they ported it. It was kind of like, this doesn't feel right.
Sometimes it happens when you farm it out to somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Which,
I mean, a weird
yeah.
one for me, like, it's not really a remaster or anything like that, but when you have, like, Castlevania, like, Dracula's Curse for the NES, and it was on the Famicom first that had the extra sound chip.
Right.
And then when it came to North America, they didn't have the extra sound chip. So it's always weird for me because I grew up with the NES version. When I play the Famicom version with the extra sound, it sounds cool, but it's like, it feels wrong, or you're like, it doesn't sound like what
You're not used to it.
Yeah.
That's the
and
thing.
I know that's like how the original composer intended it to sound, was with the extra sounds and everything like that, but I'm just like, it's cool, but it's weird. Like, it just kind of throws me off.
It's like the difference between Castlevania 3 US version and the Famicom version. That's a huge difference.
Well, I mean, there was a whole bunch of stuff they changed with that as well, because there's things like I think Sypha got nerfed, and like
There's a bunch of changes that one.
Censorship and stuff like that.
There are a bunch of games that did that.
Yeah.
What was the other game that has extra sound in it? Oh, God.
I mean, it's
on the tip of my tongue. I just can't remember it.
It's like the most popular is Castlevania for sure. That's the most obvious target.
Yeah,
But there are a few games that are sounding different.
Yeah. It's just a little weird when it, like I said, for me, like, that's the one that really stands out just because it sounds
Doki
so...
Doki Panic was another one.
Then again, that was like for the Famicom disc system.
Well, that was for the
Yeah.
FDS.
Yeah, the FDS.
So, and now obviously we have ugly ones, like I put on there Silent Hill HD.
Oh
which
yes, the
was just,
infamous.
like, those are ones where it's like the original games are just like completely butchered. Like Silent Hill HD, they screwed up the fog effect, so because they tried to make the textures pop more and stuff like that. So all the textures are just ruined because your fog effect isn't the same as it was in the original. Because the original one had that atmosphere, and part of the atmosphere was that fog. You can't really see so far, things like that. And this is more like, it's like kind of a cloudy day out. And it's just like, it really took away from it. And it had like game-breaking glitches and just like...
Oh, is that bad? I never played that one myself.
It was
it's
bad.
Like,
it was
that's
bad.
the one that always stands out for people where, like, it's bad. Like, they just butchered the original ones. And it's like, why'd you do that?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that later on. There is kind of a reason why the games are what they are and why they butchered that collection. We're gonna get into that a little later.
Yeah.
So some of them are clearly cash grabs.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the other thing I was going to
Yeah,
start
we're
talking
gonna
about
get
here.
to that
Like,
for sure.
Is collections, is it a good thing, right? Is it something that someone can go now, like, say, Castlevania collection? Somebody can go, well, I couldn't spend, $100 to buy the original games and the original cartridges and play them on my original system because, like, well, I mean, that's like $100. I could go buy Castlevania collection for, like, $10 on sale.
Yeah.
And get all those games plus, like, I think it's got like Belmont's Revenge on it. It's got
A bunch of other games, yeah.
Like, it's got a bunch of other ones. When is it that it's just a cash grab where it's just they're being lazy and just taking the games, putting emulators, slapping it in there, and being like, here's your compilation? Like, I mean, things like I know for like PS2 they had like Intellivision Lives.
Yes, I have that one.
Atari collection.
Yes.
Like how many of those are just cash grabs, right? Where they're just taking these old games. They're like, it cost us nothing to develop this game. Here's like a 50-cent CD. Slap it on there, and they're like, it'll be
It's like
$50
call it a
for
day.
that. right?
And
Yeah.
who wants to play Atari games on a PS2? Like, seriously.
No, it's
Yeah.
just not the same experience. You kind of
No.
have to have like the controllers. And like, come on, it's just a different thing
I
altogether.
think there's kind of a mixed bag. Like I know some kind of come across as a cash grab like that, where they just take games and it's just like they don't do anything with it. Like those are the ones I'm really like. Oh, it's kind of just like I put it in like the bad category because it's like they don't do anything with it. They're just like whatever. This is an easy way for us to re-release a game and make more money on it because we're not paying for any development. We're not doing anything to it. We're just taking the game, slapping a bunch together, and
But
throwing it out
at
there.
the same time, when they came out with the Namco classics,
Yeah.
at least you're getting like 8 and 16-bit arcade games. Even though they aren't redone or anything, at least they're higher quality than a bunch of, blip Atari games, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, at least when you get like the arcade ports, and it's like, well, it was never released on home consoles, like directly porting the arcade. That's like, oh, okay, you can kind of justify that one to be like, it's not great. You're not going to like go out of your way, but yeah, it's kind of cool to be able to have the arcade at home how it's intended to be.
Yeah,
Just
no.
Like
Yeah.
if they release like the Atari Pac-Man in like the Namco collection, nobody's gonna buy that. They're gonna be like, this is the worst version of the game.
Which,
Or the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man on a PS2.
Yeah.
Who the hell wants to play that?
No,
Seriously.
I would even give that to anybody I freaking hate. Like, I swear to God, like, nobody should play that. Like, just
Yeah.
leave it as it is in history.
Oh.
Don't even bother.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's a mixed bag. Like I said, I think sometimes it's just a cash grab where they're just taking, like I said, they're just taking the games. They don't care. They're like, oh, whatever. What's the cheapest ones we can get? We'll just slap a bunch together, throw it out there. Maybe somebody pays us for it. Yeah, okay. And something I think is actually like it could be good because, like I said, when the original games are costing so much, you can still experience those original games. I mean, I know you can say like, oh, the emulators and stuff like that. Yeah, okay, sure. But I think it's a way of supporting developers too. It's also showing the developers, hey, I'm willing to spend money on this, right? Like something like Castlevania. If you bought like a Castlevania collection, you're like, hey, I love Castlevania. Yeah, I'll spend money and buy that collection.
Yeah.
And it shows developers, maybe there's still the interest is there to make a new one like this.
Well, I have to look into it more closely, but there's also the remake of Symphony of the Night, Castlevania Resurrection,
Yeah, from like, I
which
believe
came
it's
out a few years ago, I think.
Oh, is that the one off the Dracula X collection or the Dracula X Chronicles? Is that the one?
No, I think it's a standalone digital-only release that came out like in, I want to say 2018.
Oh, okay.
Or was that the one that got canceled?
I don't know. Oh, I mean, we were kind of talking about. And we were kind of talking about Symphony of the Night a little bit before Resurrection. Yeah, that was the remake of it, but they pulled that from the Dracula X
Oh,
Chronicles.
canceled.
canceled March 2000.
Oh, that was the Dreamcast one.
Oh, that's a Dreamcast one.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Isn't
I'm
that
getting-
from the Hidden Palace release?
Sorry, I'm getting mixed up. There is a remake of Symphony of the Night. That
Yeah.
I think you can buy.
Yeah, for like PS4.
No.
Castlevania Requiem.
Requiem.
Because
That's
that had,
it. Sorry.
yeah, that had,
right.
that had Rondo of Blood. It had, well, I mean, it's basically just Dracula X Chronicles ported over. For
Sorry,
the PSP.
too many R's. Resurrection, Requiem.
It's like they could slap all these subtitles and like, which one is it?
Yeah, it's on the PlayStation Store.
Yeah. So that was the one, but that was Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. They just ported it because they took Dracula X Chronicles and they ported it from the PSP to PS4.
Oh, that's right.
Wait,
Yeah,
you
because
are that collection.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. 'Cause, I mean, we were talking about that. a
Cash
little bit.
grab. That is definitely a lazy cash
Oh,
grab.
that's definitely
That
a
is,
cash grab.
we gotta talk about that
Because
later,
that's when they
for
just take a game on one console and they're just like, we'll just re-release on another one. It's
Assassin's
like-
Creed Liberation, which was also a PSP title that they re-released on the Xbox 360
Yes.
and the Xbox One. Cash grab.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at like
Cash grab.
you look at things like like Assassin's Creed. They had like Ezio trilogy, right? Where it's like, okay, so they had Assassin's Creed 1, then they had 2, 3.
Yes.
Or sorry, they had 2, then they had Brotherhood, then they had Revelations,
Yes.
then they had 3 came out, and I think later on then they released the Ezio trilogy, which is supposed to be 2 Brotherhood Revelations, which
Yes.
I mean it's the best ones in the series, but they're not doing anything with it. They're literally just taking the old games and just repackaging them and then reselling it back to
They
you.
did clean up the textures a little bit. I mean, they
A
didn't
little bit,
spend
but-
too much time on it, and it actually plays pretty good. I have it on the Xbox One, but yeah, that one's
But
kind
that's
of
kinda like
that's
a-
kind of on
yeah.
the
That's
fence.
kinda-
It's on the fence though.
It's everybody loves the Ezio trilogy, but at the same
Yeah.
time, they didn't spend as much effort on it as I'd like. Like
Yeah.
a full HD remake of those 3 with like an up-to-date engine like say Odyssey or Origin or something like that. Those would be awesome because it feels really dated and clunky when you play it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, wow, this felt so fresh when it came out. Now it just feels like so old,
just kind of
old and busted.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, like I said, sometimes like that, it just feels like a cash grab where it's like they're not doing anything to the game. They're just literally taking the old game, repackaging it, and then selling it to you for full price again. It's like, okay, like I already bought all 3 games for full price, and now you're expecting me to re-buy them for full price? Like, come on. That's a little silly.
And that with the Xbox being, with its backwards compatibility with like some of the Assassin's Creed games.
Hello, Sony, are you listening?
Yeah, are you listening? Because some of them you can literally take your 360 disc and just plop it in like your Xbox One or Series X or S, and you can just play them right there.
Like black.
Black
for the original Xbox on the Xbox Series X. Looks amazing.
It looks amazing on even like one, like regular Xbox One. It looks good.
They even did an AI HD remaster of all the videos that are in the game too. So actually, it's really good. I can't talk, guys. Sorry.
Speaking of AI, AI assisted remasters. Like I'm gonna talk about that probably later on. There's a bunch of PC games in here where it's like, you can clearly tell they used AI, so that's interesting. So we're gonna get on that a bit later.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously some of the ones we kind of had on our list here, we had like some of the good remakes. Mega Man Legacy Collection. I really like those. Like they had Mega Man Legacy Collection 1 and 2, and they had Mega Man X Legacy Collection 1 and 2. Those are good. Like I said, they had the art galleries, they had boss battles, it's all the original games. I think they just kind of put like an emulator on there and it plays through that. And I really like those ones. Those were fun. I put Final Fantasy. Final Fight Double Impact, which is actually the only arcade port of Final Fight, which actually took the full arcade game and actually ported it over.
There's no like.
To what?
It was on Xbox Live Arcade on the 360.
How did I not know about this? That's one of my all-time favorite games.
I don't know.
Double Impact.
Double Impact. It's Final Fight and Magic Sword, which is kind of a weird mix of 2 games.
Oh, it should have been Knights of the Round.
I know that was so good.
So much better.
I think that Knights of the Round was by Capcom as well, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Knights of the Round is great. I love that game.
The Magic Sword is kind of...
Magic Sword is kind of whatever. I mean, it's a weird thing to kind of throw in there, but it's like, whatever.
It's a low-effort title.
Yeah. But I mean, something like that, where it's kind of nice where they actually finally took the arcade game and actually ported it over. Because before that, I mean, you had the Super Nintendo version, which I think they cut out Guy, and then they like cut out some of the stages and stuff.
Oh, it's still there, $10.
Can you? Okay, so you can still buy that one. And then they had Final Fight for they had Final Fight Guy, where they actually added Guy into the game. But Final Fight's only 1 player, isn't it? For Super Nintendo, you can only have 1 player at a time, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. And then they had the Sega CD one, which was 2 player.
Pretty sure that was 2 player.
I think that was closer to the arcade.
Very close, except they used the CD audio soundtrack.
Yeah, and I think there was like a stage was cut from it or something too. That was probably,
really?
I think so. I think there was a little bit of changes that were done to it, but I mean, Double Impact is really the one that's like the arcade perfect. Like, well, they took the arcade and basically ported it directly over, which is nice to actually be able to have that one on consoles.
I wonder if cutting out the guy from Final Fight was a memory limitation or a licensing limitation, or...
I doubt it's licensing.
I wouldn't be a memory thing, because then they later... Well, maybe, because later on they had Final Fight Guy had Guy in it, right?
But it was just Guy and Cody.
Was it?
No,
they got rid of Hagar.
Got rid of Hagar.
Yeah, so maybe it was.
But the thing is they also made a port of Street Fighter Alpha 2 for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah. Wow, but that was a terrible port, though. It had loading times and stuff like that for a cartridge game.
But they had to do a lot of like hacks and tricks and tips to get it to run. But...
Yeah, that was not really ever... I don't think that was ever... should have ever really came out for the Super Nintendo.
It's funny. People are funny now if they run that ROM through an emulator. There's no lag or anything.
Really?
The lag is... What was it? The Super Nintendo... decompressing the audio into memory, and that's what the lag is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so
because they had to do something with the audio, because it was like, they had to do some kind of sort of trick.
But the lag is just at the beginning of the level, so I mean, it's just like...
It's like,
It's a short loading blip.
It's like how many seconds?
I think it's like 4 or 5 seconds. But
Yeah.
on a cartridge-based game, it's noticeable, right? 'Cause
Yeah, well, it's enough to notice. And it's kind of like
it was like a CD title. Then you would like, whoa, this is fast.
But people were impressed because it's like, I got Street Fighter Alpha 2 on my Super
well,
Nintendo.
Exactly.
The fact that it was even on there to begin with was nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, obviously some of the other good ones that are out there, like DuckTales Remastered, where that was just like an HD upgrade of the game. Like,
Yeah.
all the mechanics and everything were like exactly the same. They just ported it directly over and just put like a nice texture. Like, I like when they do that. It's kind of like put some polish on top of it, right? They take the old game, they bring it back, slap a little polish on, like I said, throw some like little like extra little things you can do in there, and it's like, that's good. That's all you really need. Like, I mean, there's also the Disney Afternoon Collection, which we talked about previously,
But that's like the NES ROMs.
which is that's the NES ROMs. And then, like I said, same thing. They have like a little boss rush mode and stuff like that. Like, they don't really need to do a whole lot of work, I don't think, for a lot of collections to make it a good one. Like I said, put a little marquee, put a little side stuff, take the game, port it over. It's good.
After we did the last podcast, I actually bought Double Dragon Neon, and it's actually really good.
Yeah, it's really fun. Like I
See,
said.
there we go.
I mean, I actually started going back through my backlog finally too, and being like, I should play Axiom Verge. I haven't touched that.
Oh,
And
and
that
we'll
was
do
that
a whole
game.
podcast on that game. I loved that game. It was so good.
That game was really fun. I really liked that one.
Right.
I know we were kind of talking about. So I had on there. I had Turtles in Time Reshelled, which was for 360, which I think it was out for a while, and then they pulled it. I think they had it on PS3 as well, digitally.
I missed all these.
Yeah, it was. It was different. Like, I put it as like a borderline. I'm like, I don't know if it's good or bad. Like, it was nice because it was Turtles in Time, and then they updated the graphics and everything. But for the Super Nintendo version of the game, they added like stages to the game to like fluff it out a little bit more for the home consoles.
Oh.
I think it was like the snow stage and like one other one that they had added specifically for the Super Nintendo. So when you play like Hyperstone Heist, and you play Turtles in Time, the arcade game, and you play Turtles in Time on Super Nintendo, they're all different.
I thought Turtles in Time was a Super Nintendo only title.
No, Hyperstone Heist is still it was an arcade originally.
Well, there was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade.
Right. There was also Turtles in Time. It was an arcade game, and it was ported to to the Super Nintendo. They added stages to it, and then for the Genesis version, which is Hyperstone Heist, same thing. They added other different stages to it.
Oh, okay. Because
So-
I've had that cartridge since I was a kid, and I didn't know it was an arcade. How did I know that was an
Yeah, I don't know how you
arcade?
do. Yeah, I mean, a lot of things back then were arcades first. But I remember playing Turtles in Time in the arcade.
And the arcade ports, like, they got the attention. When they get to a home console, that draws, like, a lot of people.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, whoa.
Well,
Yeah.
that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game from Konami is one of my favorite games.
Yeah.
And the Simpsons game, too.
Simpsons,
Oh, yeah, The
Simpsons is
Simpsons.
great.
Oh,
All
yeah.
those, all those four
Love that game.
games, love those ones. But yeah, so Turtles in Time Reshelled. I was kind of on the fence about it because they put like a nice gloss over it and stuff like that, and they like updated the graphics and everything like that. But the issue, like, there's weird things they did where they made it like, obviously they cut the levels because they made it more like they took the arcade and imported it
It's
again.
it's a remaster or a remake?
Oh, it's kind of a remake because the thing is, there's like controls are different too. Like, you can attack in 8 directions as opposed to just normally you can only attack 2, right, left and right.
Oh, okay.
So this one you can attack like up and down and diagonally and stuff like that, which is kind of weird. Like, usually beat 'em ups are always just like they're always just horizontal plane and that's it. Right? You can't really attack in other directions. I liked it though, so I'm like, I think that kind of gets a pass. I'll put it as it's a good one.
It's still 2D though, right?
Yeah, it's still 2D.
Okay.
Like, it's still like it basically, like I said, it's the arcade again, but then they like changed. Like I said, they changed stuff around a little bit. They kind of gave it a gloss over. Like, the textures look different and kind of a little more.
I'm really looking forward to that. Was it Revenge of Shredder?
Shredder's Revenge.
Shredder's
Yeah.
Revenge.
That looks really good.
It's like we
Yeah.
are like crossing fingers that the darn thing's good.
Yeah.
It's like an amalgamation of the arcade game and Turtles in Time and
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes sometimes I think for like remasters, that's all they really need to do is just take their arcade game and just port it over, maybe throw a couple levels more in there, and like they don't need to do a whole lot to it. Like, sometimes it's nice having like, here's that arcade perfect version you've always wanted, and here it is.
Yeah, just years later down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I know we were kind of talking about Super Mario All Stars. We weren't sure about this, if that was really like the first collection of games, really. They
and
say, like,
remaster of that.
Yeah, and it's kind of a remaster too.
to me it seems to be.
Yeah.
at
But
least
they
the-
also used it as a channel to release the Super Mario Lost Levels that we never
Yeah,
got.
the
that-
Super
that's-
Mario Bros. 2 that was released in Japan only on
which
the
was
FDS.
stupidly hard.
Yeah,
And then there was the other release where you also got
Super Mario World as well.
Super
Yeah.
Mario World bundled in with it.
Yeah, I think that was later on when they started just bundling it in together with the
I
console.
think it came with the SNES Junior.
No, I think Yoshi's Island came with that.
Oh right, yeah.
It was like but it was a
I
later.
thought that was a pack-in game.
Well, this is like when the Super Nintendo was really like still very much fresh. It's like it's a vehicle for people to actually like, hey, this is like all the Super Mario games. It's like all remastered and all that stuff. So it's like it's a good reason at the time.
Yeah, well, it's fun too, and I know they re-released it too, like Super Mario Brothers, like it's like 15th anniversary, something like that.
25th anniversary, I
for
think.
the Wii.
For the Wii, I do
Yeah.
have that game, and it's like it's almost like a direct port, just with Wii controls and
Yeah.
no motion controls or anything like
Yeah.
that. So
If you think about the original Super Mario All-Stars, it's kind of very meta. Because you have the North American Super Mario Brothers 2, which is actually a remake of Famicom's Doki Doki Panic.
well, more like
Yeah.
they
And then they took that and remastered it again
Well, I don't
as
think-
Super Mario 2 for the All-Stars
That's
thing.
the thing too. Did
it's insane.
remake.
Did
Or,
they
sorry,
ever-
remaster?
Did they ever port Super Mario All Stars? Did that ever get released on the Super Famicom? Because that'd be confusing as hell for them. Because it'd be like they'd
Exactly.
be playing like Super Mario Brothers 2. It's like, oh, but
Which
that's,
one?
But that's Doki Doki Panic.
I'm pretty sure that was a North American only release.
I'm pretty sure it was like
Okay.
North American
Because it'd be
only.
confusing as hell for Japanese audiences. Because they're like, well, we have all these games. Like,
You know
why is
what?
that one this and that one's that? And,
The North American Super Mario 2 is actually popular in Japan. They actually like it.
yeah, well,
That's
I mean,
the
it's-
thing.
But they would also be getting a remaster of their Super Mario 2 in 16-bit. If
Right, but I mean, obviously,
it-
like they'd have to probably play around with like the
I'll have,
numbering.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
Like that's just an interesting thing, especially for like just anybody like in Japan. It's like, wait a minute, which Super Mario Brothers 2 are you talking about?
Yeah, well, I mean, same thing like if they did like a Final Fantasy like compilation, right? Because
Oh man.
they'd be like, oh, Final Fantasy 3 is coming back, and they're like,
Like,
wait,
what?
6 or
Well-
3?
Well, which one? It's like because of the way that the Final Fantasy series like treated in the US. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was released in Japan October 21st, 2010.
See,
That
I'd
would
be,
be
I'd be
confusing as
curious to
hell.
see that ROM now, actually, to be like, how did they keep it as like the North American 1, 2, 3 lost levels, or did they go like 1, 2, and then it's like is 2 is it like 2 brackets US? Kind of interesting to see that.
It's
But,
like, it's like, look, 1993. So it's probably been 2 years into the Super Nintendo's shelf life.
I have RetroArch
Yeah.
on my Shield. We can fire it up later and see what it looks like.
yeah, just curious. It's little things like that. I'm kind of like curious about that.
It's gotta be confusing for just our Japanese audiences, though. It's like, this is like, which one?
Yeah, well, like I
It's
said,
so
it's just
odd.
because your numbering convention gets so mixed up, and like I said, especially like Final Fantasy, like until it hit 7, it was just like, I mean, that was confusing as hell too for like North American audiences. Where like Final Fantasy 1, then they had 2 and 3 for the Super Nintendo, then all of a sudden it's 7. They're like, what the hell happened to 3, 4, 5, and 6?
Exactly.
But then it was like,
We never got them.
Well, I think
Down the road, we got it
'Cause-
somehow.
1 was the same for both. 2, I think, was Japanese 5, and then 6, I think, was, or 3 was 6. So I think we got 5 and 6, or maybe it was 4 and 6. Because I'm trying to remember. Because then they re-released them later on, though, because they for the DS, I think they re-released the games on the DS, but it was actually like the Japanese. The ones that were released in Japan that never released in North America, they like put the numbering back and then released it here on the DS.
it's such
Like,
a
some of that
freaking
stuff-
mess.
Yeah, some of that stuff
Mind blown.
yeah, some of that
It's
stuff
like,
gets to be
my
such a
God.
mess. But I mean, it was cool that they did that. Like, I kind of like how they actually came back and they released those games that you never really got to play, and then being like, okay, it's translated, and here it is.
At least after 7, they smartened up and they got.
Well,
the
then they
numbering
kind of
the
like
same.
then they just named it the same. At that point, they're just like, whatever. They jumped to 7. They're like, whatever. Like, it's gonna be the
It's
same.
such a weird.
I
little
think
vibe
the
there.
mix up in the numbering was they never thought the games would be popular here. They'd be like, "Oh, Japanese people would love to play this, but we're not sure about North America. We
Yeah,
don't know."
well, I
so-
mean, you look at RPGs for the NES, right? Like,
Yeah.
you had, like, Dragon Warrior. Dragon Warrior didn't do well here at all. Like, people are like, what the hell is this? It's too grind. Like, there's definitely a different mindset for North American and Japanese audiences, where Japanese were like, oh, okay, like, there's a lot of gameplay. You can play it for a long time, but it's like a lot of grinding. And North America is more like, I want more like quick, just play through it and I'm done.
Ultima on the NES was hugely popular though.
Yeah, I was.
But that's what we're used to playing over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you got arguably Earthbound when it was like first released to North America.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, Earthbound when that first released didn't do well at all.
Yeah, let's be
I've
honest.
never even played that.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
It's like when
bombed. It was quirky. People were like, "What the hell?" Like this. Is
yeah, at the time it was like, what is this?
Yeah, like it was weird. Like I mean, nowadays, right? You say like JRPGs, right? And people kind of know that it's kind of become a genre on its own of like Japanese role playing games.
And I think the sequel didn't even come to North America.
For Earthbound?
Yeah.
No, well, because Earthbound
was that called Home?
Earthbound was Mother.
Mother.
It was Mother.
Mother.
Yeah.
Oh, Mother.
So technically, Earthbound was Mother 3. So.
Oh.
Yes.
That's why some of these things it gets goofy where it's like, well,
It's so goofy.
They didn't release 1 and 2 to North America, but then they released 3
Okay,
instead.
so Mother was a Famicom game.
Mother was Famicom. Yeah.
Yes.
And then
So-
Mother 2 was Super Famicom?
I think it was that one. I'm not sure. I think it was Famicom still, and then Mother
Okay, and
3
then Mother
was Super,
3, which
was
we
Super-
got is Earthbound.
We got as Earthbound. Yeah.
Okay, I got it backwards. It's not. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's so
okay.
jank.
Yeah, it's hard. But I mean, you can see like the Japanese sense of humor and everything like that. Like some of the quirkiness of it is like North American audience.
We're gonna have to hire a shrink after this to sort ourselves out.
Yeah.
All right. I think we glossed over we got like Wind Waker HD
Yeah, we're
and
kind of
Twilight
just going over
Princess
some of
HD.
these. So yeah, I mean, like I said, you can see which ones are good. Like I said, Mega Man Legacy Collection I think is good. The X Collection's good. DuckTales Remastered, Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD. They just kept the gameplay the same. They just kind of gave it a nice little gloss over. And sometimes that's all you need, especially when you're going from like just one generation up. Like I know they're doing a lot right now with like the Switch, where they're just taking Wii U games and then just porting it. Like Donkey Kong, I think Tropical Freeze. I don't even know if they're really upgrading graphics at all.
You
though.
got like Super Mario 3D World Bowser's Fury, which arguably it's like
I
for the
really got
longest
that, though.
time it was like a Wii U exclusive for a time. Even though the Switch was released from like 2017, Super Mario 3D World remained exclusive until they made this sort of port
Yeah, well, they
with
ported it. I
extra
know.
stuff.
I think they like got rid of some because some of it had like motion controls too with like the Wiimote, and you had to like point at
Well,
stuff like that,
it's-
and they had to like figure out how to like work around that.
Well, you don't have to play Super Mario 3D World with like a Wiimote. You could just use the gamepad.
Yeah.
It was all fine.
Yeah,
And especially with something like Wind Waker HD and then Twilight Princess HD, the funny thing about something like, especially with Twilight Princess HD, it is literally the GameCube version that got the HD version, because the
opposed to the Wii
Wii
version.
was like the flip version,
yeah,
which is like, because technically Link is like, left-handed? And then they have to
Yes. And they
switch the
switched
thing all around?
Yeah, because most North American audiences are right-handed, so with using motion controls, they're like, well, they want to replicate how you swing your sword, so you swing your sword with your right hand.
Exactly.
But I'm left-handed.
Well,
It gets so weirded out there.
Bastardos.
yeah, you're in the minority.
Yeah.
I don't swing a sword with my right hand, Nintendo.
Yeah.
So with Twilight Princess HD, it's technically, with Link being left-handed, they made it HD, so it's actually more faithful to the GameCube version than the Wii version.
So the GameCube version was left-handed.
Yeah, which Link has always been left-handed.
Because you don't have like the motion controls on the GameCube anyway.
Yeah.
And then on the Wii, he was right-handed.
right-handed.
They
because
flipped the game
Yeah.
over.
Okay, and then on the Wii U,
They changed it back.
they changed it
he's
back.
left-handed again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what.
I am dead serious. I
I-
played
I-
that game twice now, and I can tell you as a fact.
I've never played it myself, so I didn't even know.
You kind of have to see for yourself.
Yeah. And it is funny stuff like that though, where they kind of like do weird little tweaks, and you're like, "What the hell?" Like that's kind of weird.
That would bother me.
Yeah, well, I mean, diehard fans are probably like,
That would be
Link's
a-
left-handed. What are you doing?
That would be a fundamental change that would ruin the game for me. Like,
It's like with the mask being flipped over, yeah, you would think like,
Okay.
oh, muscle memory, what do you do now?
Wait, you wonder if it almost like changes mechanics around too,
I
right?
li-
Because
I-
kind of like if you're swinging from the right and your timing is like from the one side, and all of a sudden it's from the
okay,
other
so
side.
is it just Link that changed, or did they literally mirror the whole
They
game?
mirrored the
mirrored the
whole
whole
game to
So
accommodate
when
the
you're
whole thing.
used to going to the left, you have to actually go to the right.
Yes.
In all the maps.
I am
Like,
dead serious.
What the hell, Nintendo?
Yeah, I know.
It's like, okay, because
Probably,
I
like,
think
the easiest way of doing this is just
it's like
flip the whole thing.
Nintendo figured probably like, okay, we made a version of Twilight Princess for the GameCube. It's more like suited for a controller, so we're just gonna make that one HD and screw the Wii version.
Yeah.
Sounds like a cop-out.
Yeah. Well, it's
It really depends on who you ask, like who plays the game. I don't personally mind it because I found like the Wii version for Twilight Princess a little janky.
Yeah.
So they probably had a budget in mind, gave the project to some guys that says, this is how much money you have, and they're like, we'll just mirror the game.
Yeah. Well,
Under budget.
It's such a weird thing to do, too.
It's such a weird
To
thing.
switch because they wanted to switch. It's like a Rube Goldberg machine of just like, but you just put his sword in the other hand. No, we got to flip the whole game around. What the hell? Like,
That would be like making a 360 game, and then when releasing on the Xbox One, flipping the thumbsticks around so they do the opposite things.
Yeah.
Like that would totally destroy everybody.
Yeah.
You know.
like with Wind Waker, they didn't have that problem because Wind Waker really was only for the GameCube, and there was like only one, or it didn't have to do some switching thing with what they did with Twilight Princess, and Wind Waker's pretty damn gorgeous on the Wii U.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the stuff is weird why they do like an HD remaster. Like for Wind Waker HD, it's kind of like all they really did is they just kind of cleaned it up a little bit. Like, it still looks really good. I think they just upped the resolution on it. Really, that's because it's still like it's cell shaded. It's kind of like, well, how do you do an HD cell shaded game?
It's pretty good.
kinda-
I've actually probably played like
See,
to completion twice.
Yeah.
The way cell shading works is you don't have to upgrade the textures; you just increase the resolution of the game. And
Yeah, well, and that's what I think.
Kind of
like,
just and you
it also-
anti-alias a little bit, and it just kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah.
Like I love cell shaded games; like they look awesome.
I think I like that style of game too. Like I think it's got a certain charm to it that can be fun.
Especially with like these two games. These, as far as I know, and at least personally for me, with Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD, they've actually utilized the gamepad properly. You put the map right on the gamepad,
Yeah.
as it was originally intended for that freaking gamepad. It's like, okay, I don't have to press a button to open my menu. It's just right there.
Well, that was the thing with the Wii, where they kind of took some of those ideas where you kind of like it ended up being like dual controller almost, and it made sense and it actually enhanced the gameplay by being like, well, you can just like your inventory's on your gamepad, and it's just like, okay, so it works like a second screen for you as opposed to trying to cram everything on there or everything on the other. There's little things like that I like that they did with the Wii, like it was
the Wii U.
the Wii U that they kind of could like play around with. I like that stuff.
Which boggles the mind that when they released Breath of the Wild for, both Wii U and Switch, with the Wii U version, it's like, where's the map on the gamepad? It's like, it's just switching around like where you play. It's like, are you playing on the gamepad or are you just playing on the TV?
Yeah.
It's like such a missed opportunity to make something still unique to that platform.
Yeah, but I think at that point they were kind of done with the Wii U. They're like, whatever. Here's the game.
Breath of the Wild does prove that the Wii U has basically the same processing power as a Switch, though.
Yeah, pretty much does.
I mean,
Probably just a smidge less, but Breath of the Wild running on a Wii U looks pretty much the same as.
Yeah.
it's the best looking game. Arguably, it's like probably the best looking game on the Wii U.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a bunch of the good ones you're kind of talking about.
And that with Nintendo, it's like, we got Skyward Sword HD, which is like, I don't even know how that is going to pan out.
Yeah, I think they're gonna have to do a bunch of changes to it to really, because there was a lot of motion controls. For
Yeah,
that game.
I've tried to play Skyward Sword myself with the whole motion controls and everything, and I found it a bit janky.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what they're going to do when they move on to the Switch, and they said they're going to have a new control scheme with just the controller, so no motion controls or anything.
Yeah, which I think could be good. Like sometimes like that, like a remake like that is good because they just take janky controls and they kind of just like fix
So that
it.
was originally a Switch title?
No, originally Skyward Sword was
for the Wii. Wii exclusive.
It was
Sorry,
Wii
I meant to say Wii. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
Wii.
But they're re-releasing it on the Switch as Skyward Sword HD.
See, there's a lot of games I didn't play because they tried to put the motion controls into everything, and it just didn't fit in some games.
I mean,
It's just
arguably
rude.
with
that's the one thing. Like another thing that works, I think, for remasters is like I guess more remasters is where they take the game that's just like it was on a console, it was kind of weird. The controls are weird. It doesn't really fit with conventional play style. Taking that and importing it to one that's not that anymore, and then putting conventional controls and kind of like giving it a second life. I like when they do stuff like that. I think it can work out really good because you get really good games that people just didn't really care about. Like, I mean, you look at Mario Galaxy for re-releasing that for 3D All-Stars. Like, it was a great game on the Wii, but I also think, like, I mean, some of the pointer control stuff,
It can be
really need it.
janky sometimes to play
They
now.
didn't overdo the motion controls in Super Mario Galaxy.
They
but
didn't, but I'm just using that as, like, an example.
A
Of one.
bad
You could take
example
one.
is, I can't remember which one, but one of the Call of Duty games. When you want to turn corners
Call of
in
Duty
that game,
That
for the
was
Wii.
like, what?
it's like,
How
why
you-
do I have to move the Wii thing left and right?
Yeah.
Like, at the screen to get your guy to turn. The game was unplayable. You couldn't aim your gun or anything.
That's just bad ports, though, where they're trying to, like, really
Yeah.
hammer in the, motion controls.
Yeah, that's a good example of bad motion control implementation.
Yeah.
Super Mario Galaxy, they did a good job because
It's almost as if you need Nintendo to demonstrate that, hey, this is how you're supposed to use it.
Yeah.
use it as like a light feature with like regular conventional controls as opposed to making it the control scheme like.
Yeah, like it's just like it's got to be like a subtle thing almost to it.
Yeah,
And I could argue that, what Nintendo did and made it popular is gyro aiming.
Yeah,
I'm
Gyro
sorry.
aiming is actually pretty good. It's like when you play Breath of the Wild, it's like with the Switch at least, is that you can kind of hold your bow and arrow, and it's like you can just move your controller just a little bit, like almost like motion controls, and then you can aim just slightly up, slightly down.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's kind of hard to play the game without it now,
Yeah.
personally.
yeah. But
Like gyro aiming's like, that's one of like the many inventions like Nintendo actually did right after the Wii.
That's actually a feature in Toad Treasure Tracker actually.
yeah, well, I
Yeah.
prefer the gyroscopic stuff versus the motion controls. Motion controls were just like they were never accurate enough. Like I know they kind of upgraded it with the Wii Motion Plus and stuff like that to be. I think they added a gyro in there to make it like a little bit more accurate, and that kind of helped. But I mean that, like I said, motion controls for me, like especially coming from like conventional gaming to something like that, you need to have like a little bit. It's got to be subtle. Like you can't have it as your main movement and stuff like that. It just doesn't work. It's not a huge fan of that. But
Then again, let's be honest, like, if you try playing like House of the Dead on the Wii with like a la Zapper or something, and I could see kind of that working.
yeah, something like that,
with-
like an on-rail shooter, that works.
Like an
because
on-rail
that was
shooter.
like basically like an on-rail shooter works for that because it's like, well, like arcades and stuff like that were the same idea. It was just
Yeah,
on
like
rails.
like House of the Dead on the Wii, that totally works because that's how you played the arcade game,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly,
You
and it's,
pointed the gun at the screen and you shot stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That totally works.
that actually makes sense because now you don't have to like hunt like a CRT now in order to have light guns.
Right.
You can just have the Wii, especially with the Wii having that big zapper thing,
yeah,
that
well,
zapper
they had
accessory.
the peripherals for it and everything like that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like that. I can see that actually working. So,
Yeah.
okay, what do we have next on our list here?
Just jumping a little bit here. Like, I don't know, remakes. I think sometimes remakes... so, I think we define the remakes as being, like, Resident Evil 2 and 3 and stuff like that. Like, Resident Evil 2, 3...
The original Resident Evil as well.
Yeah, well, because they did Resident Evil Origins, which I think that was...
Didn't
but
they-
wasn't that porting the GameCube version of the game, which was originally... Like, sometimes you just see, like, they port it, but then they kind of, like,
gets
put it,
fuzzy.
upgrade it. Like, it gets kind of a little bit fuzzy with it. But, I mean, full-on remakes, stuff like Final Fantasy VII. I'm not sure how I feel about that one. I haven't played it yet.
I have played it a little bit.
I've seen him play it and
Okay.
I want it.
What's your thoughts on it? Because they changed, like, it's more like an action RPG now
Not
instead. Like,
exactly. There's like a mode where they call it classic mode, and you could literally just focus on commands.
okay.
So you don't have to play it like an action RPG. It's like you can just go into a battle, like okay, random encounter, and then you can just focus on commands. You don't even have to move. You can still though, if
Yeah.
you want to, but you can kind of play like
Like the old one was.
there's almost like a turn-based thing going on. It's like a weird hybrid that I kind of actually like.
Yeah.
I like the action thing because personally, I bought a PlayStation so I could play Final Fantasy VII. So I went from playing Final Fantasy 3 on the Super Nintendo to playing Final Fantasy 7, and I hated it. I
Yeah.
hated the pre-rendered backgrounds. I hated that your 3D character
Your
Cloud had
polygonal.
to sort of interact with these horrible backgrounds, and I never actually finished the game because I thought it was horrible. Like I was
Really?
But-
supremely disappointed. And then I saw Ramon playing the FF7
The remake.
in action RPG mode, and I'm like, okay, this is gonna get me to play it now.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's what the remake actually achieves. It's like you got fans that are like, they played the modern games
well,
for
'cause I
Final
know
Fantasy.
The more modern Final Fantasies are more like action RPGs.
Yeah,
like, it's a lot more,
arguably, yeah.
like, moving around and stuff like that, which
Like, personally, Final Fantasy 3, I think is a masterpiece of an RPG. Like, it's one of the best. So when they came out with 7 with those janky pre-rendered backgrounds...
See, I'm on the fence about 7 because I'm like, well, I love the original one and I want to get the new one, but I'm like, I don't like how they split it up. And I've heard like they changed the story and stuff like that, which I'm like, okay, I can take it or I can leave it. But it's weird for me that they split the game up and they're like, well, here's the first one. Here's the next. I'm like,
Well, there's probably a logic to that because, when you think about the original game, and the original game already came on 3 discs,
Yep.
Yeah.
that is a true thing. And you can understand that, every area is kind of like they have their own, unique assets and everything. And knowing that modern game design is like they want to reuse a lot of assets because,
Right.
you want to save space. With the way that Final Fantasy VII is laid out, it's like you almost kind of have to make unique assets for every single area. And you can have too many reuses there.
Yeah, I don't know. See, to me, I feel like that's kind of a cash grab because it's kind of like, okay, they could release the whole game probably on one, but now it's like, well, nobody's gonna. If you buy the first one, you're like, well, you bought an incomplete game. You're gonna want to buy, say, 2 and 3 to be like, well, I want to finish the game, and you're not gonna buy just 2. You're not just gonna buy 3. Like you're gonna buy either all of them or none of them. And to charge full price for it, I'm kind of like, I don't know how I feel, but I'll probably still get it when
So,
it's cheaper. But
Part
for now,
1 and Part 2 is $80 each?
yeah, it's full MSRP.
Who knows what Square Enix actually does with it, but
And it's 3 parts or 2 parts?
I don't know.
because
I know they split it, but I don't know how many parts they're doing.
Oh, okay.
But the first release that we got now is the equivalent of basically the first disc. That's the first disc for the content, and they kind of added a bunch of like story quests and just to pad it out with arguably something from like Advent Children where they kind of added more into the universe. They kind of added back into the remake.
See, I would
It's
prefer
starting
to
to sound like cash grab.
yeah,
Yeah.
to me, that's why I'm like, just on principle, I'm kind of like, I don't know. Like, I mean, to me, something
Depends on
like
who
that,
you ask, though.
that works well like that would be like, I know this one wasn't really universally well received, but Final Fantasy 13. So Final Fantasy 13, they had the game, you could play the game, and it had a full story start to finish. Then they had 13-2, which is like, well, then they kind of had like
Like a direct sequel.
like it was like continuing that same story, but then like going a little bit further. Then they also had Lightning Returns, which then like filled in some of the blanks between the two games.
So there's 13 games.
Yeah, there's Final Fantasy 13.
13-2.
But that's the thing is like each game you could play it individually and you could still have a full story. Like
Okay.
it was more like it was almost like DLC. Like you could buy the first game, you could play it, and you're like, hey, it was a complete story, start to finish, whatever. And you could buy 13-2 and be like, oh, okay, well, I want to keep playing that story. I want to go a little bit further. And then Lightning Returns, it's like kind of
Okay.
filling in between.
I apologize for my earlier comment that the numbers synced up after 7. Apparently they don't.
Wow,
For a
does.
time
have-
they did screw up like
Because you
that.
have 10,
Well, they had
X
10
and
X,
X2.
yeah.
And X2. Don't even get me started on what the story of Final Fantasy 15 is.
I don't even play
The
them
thing
anymore. I
is,
couldn't even tell you.
the story goes that it was supposed to be Final Fantasy versus 13. And it's like, it's like it languished for like a decade. And it's
they-
like they were like flip-flopping like, are we sure we're going to do this? And then probably they made up their minds like, yeah, we're going to make this into like another mainline Final Fantasy game. Screw the versus 13 and make it Final Fantasy 15 like for good.
Are they all standalone games? Or
Like-
do they tie into each other somehow?
Well, technically, a lot of Final Fantasy games, like, you could play 7 and not really,
Yeah.
care anything about the
Do
last
they even,
games.
Do they even take place in the same universe?
No, I think
No,
pretty
not
much
even
every-
that
Pretty much
all
every
the
Final
time.
Fantasy was like,
On
well, they
its-
pretty much all. I think they're all in there. I'd have to. Really
They have their
look.
own self-contained, most of them anyway. Unless it's
Yeah,
like the Final
there might be-
Fantasy 13 thing where they kind of directly continue.
Well, I think that's why they kind of did like 13-2 and stuff like that because it was like, well, it's still the same story, same universe. We're just gonna continue it, so we're gonna have like kind of like side whatever 13-2.
Okay.
So, but honestly, like for the most part, I find remakes are typically a good thing because it's taking the original game that was kind of like, well, maybe there's like, I mean, if you said for example like Skyward Sword HD, I'm like, it seems like it should be good because it was just like the original game was hampered by bad controls, and then taking that and like remaking it for the new console, changing controls, stuff like that. I'm like, okay, that's good. And I know things like Resident Evil 2 and 3, completely redoing the game, and it's just was so well received, and like stuff like that is like that's good. Like
it makes it more accessible to people as well, because there are some people that
they don't want to play the old
They
games.
don't want to buy an old PlayStation and play the first Biohazard / Resident Evil, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think on the developer side of it too, it's they're saving obviously things like they're not having to worry about storyboarding and stuff like that. They already have the story, the settings, everything like that. They're just like, okay, we're basically redoing the whole game on this new engine and whatever.
But if you're a hardcore collector, I don't know if you feel that. I mean, not you personally, but I mean collectors feel that these remakes are cheapening these things that they've collected and harvested all these years.
That was something I was thinking of a little bit. So it seems to me like if you take, for example, in contrast with movies, right? You take a movie and then you remake the movie. People usually hate it. They're like, no, it's not as good as the original. The original is now worse because of this and blah, 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 blah. But then I find with remakes for video games, it's like the opposite. People are like, oh, it's amazing, it's so good, and then some people actually want to like go back and like experience the original games that they might not have played before. It's that weird, like, I don't know why that is, where maybe it's just like the experience of it, because with movies there's still like the same experience, right? It's just like, well, like they
may have moved the script a little bit, or like
they're gonna change scenes, they're gonna do this and a little that, like they're not just. But then with, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think, like
the one example I'm thinking of in my mind right now is a Saturn game, Radiant Silvergun, right?
Right.
Like, that is literally impossible for the average person to afford, right?
Right.
And
like the original game, no way in hell.
It would be nice if they did an HD remake of that to make it accessible to people that can't either be bothered to buy it or simply can't afford it, because it's the price of that game is ridiculous.
You think about how many people have a Saturn, right? They're gonna go out.
Saturn hardware is also getting very hard to find nowadays too.
So I don't know. I think remakes are good, especially when they just like they take the original game. Like, I don't think everything needs a remake, because something like Radiant Silvergun, like, you're not fundamentally going to change the game. It's more just like an HD remaster.
Fresh coat of paint and all that stuff.
So stuff with like Resident Evil, like, I mean, there's certain games that you can do a remake of, and there's certain ones it's just not like, you just got to do like a remaster, like just give it a fresh coat of paint and re-release it, and that's good enough.
Because I mean, even if you could afford like Radiant Silvergun, I mean, I guess you could emulate it as well.
Yeah, I mean, but there's always the argument to be made, well, you could just emulate it. But to me, I'm like, well, there's something about having the physical cartridges. And,
yes.
It's a different experience.
Yeah, like there's it just fires off your brain a little bit differently. The nostalgia of physically taking the game, putting your system, playing it, stuff like that.
But I mean, if people can go to any digital store, whether it's Microsoft, Sony, or whoever, and buy the game and play it on something, you're playing a game that was made 20 years ago.
Well, that's why some of the things too. I don't think that like physical media is really going away. I know there's been a long time talking about like, well, physical media is going away. It's going to be this, that. But I don't really see that.
It's not going to go away. It's going to evolve. I think.
It's going to be like, collectors are still going to collect anyway.
Well, but I mean, like the new generation growing up, like I can't really see them suddenly, like I think there's still that nostalgia for them to be like, oh, taking a physical, something you can tangible and like putting it in your console and stuff like that. Like
I'm in that.
I think there's still a nostalgia for people like that. So I don't really see physical gaming, at least for next like 40 years. I don't see them.
But at the same time,
digital.
have you seen any physical copies of Series X games or PS5 games?
I've seen
I have
some,
for PS5, but I mean it's not so new though. I mean, how much are you going to really see that, right?
Unless it's some collector's edition, then usually I won't bother.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the other argument you can make, is like coming in the future is that
I like physical games.
It's going to be things like LRG that are really driving the future of like digital versus physical, because you buy your digital, okay, you get the game, it's cheaper, or you buy the physical, but here's all these like little goodies that go with it, and you get like little collector's edition stuff.
No, there is a new conversation starting up now that is, okay, so you charge $80 for a physical copy of a game, so that includes making the case, printing the stuff, stamping the CD, shipping it to a store.
Right.
Blah, blah,
all
blah.
that stuff.
Yeah, why is digital?
You're also paying $80 for digital, where you click a button and it just downloads to your console.
Yeah.
People are like, hey, why isn't digital just marginally cheaper?
Like $10 cheaper or $20 cheaper, because
but at the same time, it costs millions of dollars and years to make these games. So personally, I understand why there isn't a price difference.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other thing is figure if there's a price difference, then suddenly everyone's just going to buy digital because, well, I don't care, I'd rather save $20, and then that just becomes a lot bigger conversation of what you're actually. You make one cheaper than the other. Well, you know you're going to start pushing everyone to the other one that's cheaper. But then, now you made all these copies. They're just going to languish there. So it's kind of like, well, they make more money on the one, they make less money on the other. But you still got to kind of have both.
Now, as an example here, I just pulled up that Horizon Zero Dawn cost 45 million euros to create.
Which is a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
That's
That's a lot of Canadian Tire dollars.
yeah, that's
a lot.
That's on par with making a movie nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's-
movies are 200 million, 100 million.